Hello, students. Today we are going to read the third chapter of the book An Alien Hand, and the chapter is The Desert. As the title of the chapter suggests, this chapter is about the desert. This chapter shows the beauty of a desert. Generally, we consider that deserts are not beautiful, there are only sand dunes and no plantations are there. But the writer here shows how beautiful this place is. We also have the theme that the importance of showing courage in the face of hardships should be learnt by us, because those creatures, those plants who are living there in desert, they have got the courage in the face of hardships. That's why they were surviving. What shall we read in this chapter? In this chapter, we shall read about the popular belief, what people think deserts are. We will come across what an oasis is. We will know about sand dunes, variation in temperature in desert, and at last we will know how the animals and plants have adapted themselves to the situation. So, all these points will be discussed here in this chapter. The desert. What points we will go through in the first part? A desert is generally without water and vegetation. We will come to know the general conception about desert or people. Secondly, we will know about a green patch stretch with fresh water and green trees in the middle of vast desert is a beautiful sight. So it is really a beautiful sight if we have got in middle of the desert a green patch or a green stretch of land with fresh water. So this is a beautiful sight, and we all know what this beautiful sight is called. This is called an oasis. We will also know that a desert may be too hot or too cold. So let us go through the chapter. Those of us, those people among us who live in regions, areas covered with forests and surrounded by hills. So those people who live in hilly area or near forests, those people may find it difficult to imagine what a desert is really like, because those people had not seen desert in their life. So they would not believe that there is such an area where there is sand all about. So what is a desert is not known to those people who live in hilly areas or in forests. The popular belief is that. What is the popular belief? Popular belief, the general belief of people. What is the general belief of people about desert? That it is an endless stretch of sand. So what people generally think, that desert is an endless stretch of sand where no rain falls and therefore no vegetation grows. So this is the general conception about desert, that desert is a place where there is no vegetation, where there is no rainfall, where there is only stretch of sand. It is dry, hot, waterless, and without shelter. So this area is without water, it is hot, it is dry. So this is the general conception, but this is not entirely correct. But the writer says that this is not completely right, entirely completely correct. This conception or this popular belief is not completely right, though somewhat it is correct, but not completely. For those who have studied it, for those for those people for those people who have studied it desert, those people who have studied deserts, the desert can be a beautiful place. So for whom deserts are beautiful places, those people who had studied deserts deeply, they know that deserts are really beautiful. It is the home of a variety of people, animals, and plants that have learned to live under very hot and dry conditions. The desert is. The desert is the home of variety of people. So many people would live in deserts. So many animals would live. So many plants are there in deserts. And those animals, plants, people, they have learned to live under this very hot and dry condition. So they have adapted themselves to the situation. In first paragraph, he talks about the idea, the notion of those people who have not seen desert at all. They believe that it might be only a sandy area with is much hot, with is no vegetation, no rain is there. But the writer also says the opinion of those people who have studied deserts, and according to those people, deserts are beautiful because in deserts, so many people, animals, and plants live. True, the ground is not always hidden by a cover of grass, plants, and trees as it is in other climates. It is true, the ground is not always hidden by a cover of grass, that there is not much grass on the ground. It is quite clear because the outer surface is very hot. That's why so much grass will not be found. So many plants will not be found. So many trees will not be found as it is in other climates, as are found in other climates, in rainy areas, in those areas where there are so many forests are there, where there are so many rocks. So in other climates, grass could be seen on the land. But whenever it rains here, which is rare, desert flowers bloom, and the sight can be as rewarding as that of any tropical garden. But whenever it rains, though there is not much rain in a desert region, but whenever it rains, which is rare, which is not very common, rare, not very common, and when it rains, desert flowers bloom. So there are also flowers that bloom in rainy season, and the sight can be as rewarding. And that sight of flowers blooming in the desert is as rewarding, is as attracting, is as good as that of any tropical garden, as the sight of any garden in the tropical region. A desert is not always a flat, unchanging wasteland of dry sand as it is generally considered. It is generally considered that a desert is a unchanging wasteland of dry sand, wasteland where there is no vegetation and it is a dry land. But the writer says a desert is not always that. It is not always a flat, unchanging wasteland of dry sand. It may have mountains. Deserts are not always the places where sand dunes are found. Deserts may have mountains. Deserts may have hills. It may have an oasis, big or small. Deserts may contain an oasis, and the oasis may be big or small, but deserts might have oasis. An oasis is like a green island, is a place in the middle of the desert where a spring, fountain, or a water spot, or a well gives plants and trees a better scope to grow, a better chance to grow. So, in an oasis, there is a water spot maybe coming from deep of the earth to the surface. It might be a spring or a well, and because of that spring, because of that well, there are so many plants, there are so many trees growing there. A desert may be hot, like the Thar Desert, it is very hot. Or cold, like Ladakh. Ladakh is also a desert region where, though it is not very hot, it is cold. But generally speaking, if a place has little or no water and vegetation, people usually call it a desert. So, what is a desert? A common view about desert is that it is a place that has little without article, negative sense. So, that has little or no water and vegetation. So, the place where there is little water, where there is no water and vegetation, it is called desert by people. Some deserts are almost totally without water, and some deserts are there where there is no water at all. In such places, strong winds blow, raising heaps of sand and depositing them as mounds. These are called sand dunes that shift and move endlessly across the desert. Few plants can survive on such dry, shifting sands. So, now in this paragraph, the writer talks about the desert of sand. Some deserts are almost totally without water, and the deserts where there is no water, so only sand will be there. In such dry places, strong winds blow, and when the wind blows in such places, it raises heaps of sand and deposits, puts them as mounds. So, what happens when strong winds blow? The heap of sands are raised, and heaps of sands are deposited as mounds. Mounds, big heaps. The sand has got big heaps. These are called sand dunes, and these are called sand dunes. Sand dunes are the heaps of sand that are created by the strong winds in a desert that shift, and those sand dunes are able to shift, and those sand dunes, they shift, move from one place to other, and move endlessly across the desert, and across the desert endlessly, continuously, they move from one place to the other. Few plants can survive on such dry, shifting sands. Few plants, again, few without article gives negative sense. So, not many plants can survive on such dry, shifting sands. So, this was about a desert of sand. Now, we will read the second part of the chapter, the desert. In the first part, we have read the general belief of people about desert, about different types of deserts, sand dunes, oases, and now in this part, we will go through the desert plants and animals who have learned to require much less water than most plants and animals. In this part of this chapter, we will read about the animals and plants who have learned to do without much water. The camel is a typical desert animal. We will know about it. And we will read about smaller desert animals who have unusual means of satisfying their need for water. So, all these points we will go through here in this part. All living things need water in order to survive. So, water is the most important part of our life. The few plants and animals that live in desert have developed the ability to require less water than most plants and animals. And the few plants and animals The few, it means in desert not many plants and animals are there, but whatever plants and animals are there, they have learned or they have developed the ability to require less water. They do not require much water than most plants and animals, than most plants and animals in other regions. The plants and animals in other regions, they require much water, but the desert plants and animals do not require much water. The camel, popularly known as the sheep of the desert, everyone knows about this creature. The camel can drink a lot of water at one time. It can drink a lot of water at one time. Camels can do without, live without. Camels can do without water for days together, for many days. After taking a lot of water, a camel can do without, can live without water for many days. The reason is they sweat very little. And what is the reason that they do not require much water is that they do not sweat, they do not perspire. We sweat because we must keep our body temperature constant. And this is the scientific reason why sweat comes on our body. It is because our body wants to maintain the temperature. That's why the sweating comes. We sweat when it gets hot. When it is hot, we sweat. And this cools the body. And by sweating, our body cools. Camels can stand high body temperature, but camels do not sweat because they can stand. Stand means bear. Because camels can bear, tolerate high body temperature. They don't need to sweat and can therefore retain the water they drink for long periods of time. They do not need to sweat because they could tolerate high body temperature. That's why they do not need to sweat, and because they do not sweat, so they retain, keep the water they drink for long periods of time. So, this is the reason why camels do not take water many times. The smaller desert animals do not drink water. Camels do drink water, but there are so many smaller desert animals that do not drink water. They burrow underground during the hot day and come out at night to eat. So those small creatures, what would they do? They burrow. They would dig holes underground. Burrow, dig holes underground. They burrow underground during the hot day and come out at night to eat. They dig the ground, dig deep holes in the ground when it is hot at daytime, and when it is night and the temperature is low, they come out to eat. Some of them eat other animals, and some of those creatures, they eat other animals, and they get water they need from the moisture in the meat, and from the meat of those animals that they eat, they fulfill their need of water. Others eat plants and seeds and get the water they need from plant juice. So some creatures get water from the flesh of other creature, from the meat of other creatures, other animals, and some animals, some smaller animals, they eat plants and seeds and they fulfill their desire of water from the plant juices. Desert plants also adapt themselves to the life they had. We have learned that desert animals, they have adapted themselves to the desert condition, and now the writer is talking about the desert plants. Plants also had learned to adapt. Desert plants also adapt themselves to the life they lead, to the life that they lead in the deserts. Cactus plants store water in their thick stems. We have seen cactus and they have got thick stems, and they could store water in those stems. The roots lie close to the surface of the ground and quickly absorb the moisture from the light rains that occasionally fall. So, the roots of the cactus plant are not very deep, they are close to the surface. That's why, whenever there is rain, they get the moisture, they absorb the moisture quickly that occasionally fall. Though the rain does not fall often, is enough for cactus plants to absorb enough moisture. The major feature of all desert is, of course, dryness and variations of temperature. The major, the main, the main feature of all deserts is, what is the main quality of deserts? Of course, dryness. Deserts are dry. These are the main qualities. And variations of temperature. And temperature in a desert varies. How it varies? There is a gap between the temperature of day and night. In humid climates, the moisture in the air acts like a blanket and protects the Earth's surface from the hot rays of the sun. How do we not feel much heat here? It is because of the blanket that is created by the moisture in the air. Those people who live in the humid climates, they do not feel much hot because of the moisture that has created a blanket over their heads so that the rays of the sun do not reach them much. That's why they do not feel much heat. The absence of this blanket in desert lands causes the desert to heat up rapidly during the day. So, why is there so much heat during the day in the desert? Because in the desert area, that blanket of the moisture is not available. And because of the lack of that blanket of the moisture, the roof of that moisture is not there. That's why it gets heated up rapidly, quickly during the day, and to cool off rapidly at night. And it also cools off rapidly, quickly at night. So in the morning, the desert gets heated early, and when it is getting evening or night, it gets cool early, quickly. That's why there is much variation of temperature. Deserts are an important part of nature's great plan. Deserts are having its own importance. In the nature's plan, it has got great role to play. They are there like the dense forests and the deep oceans. They are as precious, they are as valuable as the dense forests and deep oceans. Just because they are hot and dry, the fact is that they are hot and dry, one should not look upon them as useless parts of the earth. Because of this fact, we should not consider deserts as useless parts of the earth, because deserts have got its own value in the ecosystem. It has got its own part in the ecosystem. So, what have we learned from this chapter? This chapter is about deserts, and we should know that deserts are an important part of nature's great plan. They are not useless. They are not useless parts of the earth, as we could think when we will see that only stretch of sand is there and nothing else. But in ecosystem, Deserts play a great role. Deserts are also beautiful. We cannot say that because of the stretch of sand, deserts are not beautiful. Deserts have got its own beauty. Deserts have plants, they have flowers, they have animals. We also learn from this chapter that we should try to adapt to the hard situations and show courage. We should not give in to the hardships. With this note, with this moral, we can say that the chapter is really a good one. I hope that you have learned a lot and grabbed the meaning of the chapter, moral of the chapter. Thank you and bye till my next video.